We never had more than 50 people on the site in the same month. It was just a few of us, writing stories, chatting, generally hanging out with each other. And about 2 weeks or so into the community, I realized something different about the place. Unlike large websites like Twitter or Instagram, everyone knew each other. We kept track of each other's birthdays. We left little gifts. We became friends. And our chat group had one of the kindest things ever, a vent channel where people when stressed could talk about their troubles and receive encouragement from others. We've had people talking about discrimination they faced in the neighborhoods, emotional tumult from ending friendships, stress from school, all sorts of stuff. And every time, the rest of us would offer comfort. It was a place where kindness and empathy reigned. They talked openly about their troubles, perhaps more openly than they ever would do in real life, and they got encouragement from people who would understand them. In return, they did the same for us when they needed it. However, this came with a downside. The channel was dedicated to vents and only vents. We comforted other users, but in doing so, we first read through the words. We experienced their pain. A few weeks of continuously browsing these depressing paragraphs, and we too started feeling dejected. What we read influences us. This is why books, stories about made-up people in made-up lands, can change and inspire so many. Vents are written by distressed people looking for a way to put their sadness into words. And as we, the other people, process these words, we take on their pain. The internet is a messed up place. We gain so much because of it. Access to millions of resources, an ability to know whatever is going on in the world at any given time, both width and depth of information. But do we get only what we want? No. We see poverty around the world. We see how people on the brink of starvation can suffer. We see talented children who have been inflicted with the most terrible of diseases. We see how much devastation war can inflict on a nation. We see all the atrocities that have been committed by idiots and dictators. We hear the common people's words over recordings. We see their faces, and we see all the scars that they bear. Wounds on the body, and other harsher, deeper wounds on the heart. We get to witness all of this almost firsthand. There's no end to it. Take any platform or medium that you may use for news every day. When you scroll through photos of devastation in other countries, when you read posts asking for help, people asking strangers on the internet for just one bit of support, your mind reflects the state of what you see. More than 90% of all news on the internet is negative. Negativity is what our minds react the most to. We often cannot help but empathize. Poverty, war, famine, death. Those are subjects which haunt us all. Perhaps giant dark clouds. Perhaps not over our own land, but somewhere. Somewhere else. It all happened somewhere else, didn't it? War, famine in Africa, continents away. War in the Arab countries, on the other side of the world. Death, suffering, human grief and human pain, all that was just summed up with figures. We can say that over 70 million died in World War II, and that's okay. 70 million, 70,000, what difference does it make? You just have to add 3 zeros, and 3 zeros add up to nothing. We don't get to experience the fear of air raids and the stint of trenches firsthand. Statistics doesn't talk. Statistics doesn't press its lips to our ears and whisper all the unsung tunes of suffering hearts, its hot rancid breath burning like sulfur on our cheek. We put distance between us and them, and that made it all okay. Our hearts cannot bear the burden of the world, and so we dismiss it. we attempt to ignore it. We cover our eyes with a blanket in hopes that it will go away. It doesn't. But now we have this glorious, glorious invention called the internet. Now we can see the bodies lying unburied on the streets. Now we can see the bombs as they plummet towards the deaths of hundreds of fellow humans. The truth about the world is that not everything is pleasant. We have war, we have death, we have bad people who will do bad things for bad reasons. We have people like Hitler who will commit genocide on an entire race. To read about the Holocaust and how many people it killed is one thing. To experience it as a victim is quite another. Think about all the turbulences in the past year that you have experienced. Tests that you didn't do too well. Deadlines which you missed or perhaps almost missed. Relationships with classmates that you messed up bad, so bad. Look at the people you pass along the street. Look at the people sitting around you here in this room. Every one of them has a story. Every one of them has experienced the same pain, or perhaps more. This is what the human race has to bear every day. How many people on a street, a city? How many hearts in a nation, a continent, an earth? Hearts, all of them beating, all of them bleeding. We bear this. Every hour, minute, second, we bear this. It's a choice and quite a simple one. On the one hand, we have ignorance and false happiness, a castle in the clouds floating high above the world. On the other hand, we have the truth and all the terrible consequences that come with it. Knowing the reality of the world comes at a price. In knowing and understanding more about the world, we lose yet another bit of our vanishing innocence. We start off in the world thinking that people are basically good. In time, we learn that this isn't true. We see how selfish people can be, how ruthless and how without virtue. We see how much length some will go to just so that they may satisfy a minor part of their thirst for power. We search for the abyss. We find it. We find it staring back at us. We lose yet another bit of the light we hold in our minds. But all that must be learned. Only when we know about the horrors of the world can we be able to avoid them. We find the void. We make a note of it in our minds. We map down the territory, and we mark it with a warning sign to deter future travelers. We learned about the terrors of slavery, and so we set up laws guaranteeing freedom and equality for all people. We learned about tyrants, and so we set up other institutions to counterbalance that power. We give votes to the common people so that everyone may have a say about the nation, so that no dictator will ever rule over the land as easily as ever before. Civilization is fragile. It was built as a form of restraint upon human nature. We have laws to tell us not to steal, not to murder, not to pillage or cheat or destroy. In truth, we are but a step away from barbarianism. This flame which we kindle can go out at any moment. And so, knowing the transience of the very thing we cherish as a species, is this not another reason to protect it with all our might? If kindness is so hard to come by in the world, should we not treasure it as much as possible while we can? We peer into the darkness and are horrified, and then we can turn, stare into the light, and see it for all it's worth. Thank you.